Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
I got to get my own open. If I'm going to fill in for Brien Hanley, I got to get my own open at some point. Tim Fitzgerald filling in for Big B. Hopefully we'll have him back tomorrow as he has a little more work being done on him today. Poor guy. He's finding out it's not fun being old. And we effort on here. You get the backup quarterback. Everyone wants him until he plays. That's me. Cody, Nagel, Alec, Busse here to give you your game day preview for the Big 12 Conference. And I'm excited to be filling in here because these two guys, I highly respect them. Let's put it that way. I trust them with this portion of our scheduling, of our programming here at the Insiders. Guys, welcome to the show. Hope everything's going well. Congratulations, Alec. The team you cover won. The team I cover did not win, and it wasn't pretty. And all that has set an interesting stage for this week, guys. As soon as we start to think we know the Big 12, here comes KU messing with everyone. They're just running a dump truck right through the middle of the standings and destroying the Big 12. Look, there's entertaining, Cody, but this might have gone over the top. This is chaos. This is pure. This even Big B's like, this is a lot of chaos. This is too much chaos. This is crazy what's going on in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I think we thought coming into the year that, there would be a ton of parity, but I don't think we expected, sort of this flip like midway through the season where Kansas, which hadn't won, a conference game or even beat an FBS opponent yet, suddenly starts knocking off the top teams, in the standings, and like you said, causing all this chaos. So, I mean, they've got some more opportunities here, especially coming up with Colorado, and it looks like it's probably going to, continue here for, as these final weeks shake out.
Yeah. Alec, Kansas State dodged the bullet. KU was a better team on that day, but K-State found a way to win. I would have bet a lot of money that Iowa State was going to win at Arrowhead over Kansas, but you guys got stuck with the rejuvenated Kansas. Hey, we're good again. I'm a real boy. It's just kind of amazing how they flipped the switch, and it happened to Iowa State.
Yeah, I went into that game at Arrowhead between Iowa State and KU and fully thought that KU could beat Iowa State. I think it ended up being about a 3.5 point spread around the time that it closed. So certainly wasn't shocked that KU won. The way that KU won 2 weeks ago, I think was kind of surprising. And just the overall season that KU has had in 2024 is just kind of like an enigma. I think 5 of their 6 losses this season are by 1 score or less. Within those 5 losses, multiple of those are like by less than 4 points. And I think what you've kind of seen here in the last couple of weeks is just maybe a regression to the mean of what we thought this team really was going to be at the beginning of the season. Remember, they were picked in the preseason top 5 of the Big 12 by us media members. Now, that might be the worst preseason media poll in the history of preseason media polls, considering the way it's shaked out. So maybe we were idiots at the beginning of the season, and maybe I sound like an idiot right now. But yeah, I think the way they've played in the last couple of weeks, to me, it's really impressive because against Iowa State, it was basically a shootout. The offense put up a lot of the numbers that I think we expected all season, with Jalen Daniels having a good game, throwing for almost 300 yards. Luke Grimm had a really big catch in that game. Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw both played well. I guess Highshaw returned that weekend. Yep. And then last week at BYU, they won a low-scoring game. And I think the mark of a really good team in most cases is the ability to win in different ways. And what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with KU is the ability to win a high scoring game, but then also to respond and win a low scoring kind of rock fight, fist fight game that they won out in Provo.
Yep. Ironically, KU didn't lose in different ways. They turned the ball over late and the defense couldn't stop anyone. And that flipped itself. The script totally changed last Saturday night. It was actually a Big 12 after dark game worth seeing to the very end, as I almost feel like KU stole BYU's mojo. To be undefeated at this point in the season means you've had some fortune. Some things have gone your way, and we had seen that with BYU, a really good team, but they had some really good bounces their way. And KU had been the opposite. And then comes the pooch kick, Cody, and it bounces off a BYU player's helmet through someone's hands, and Kansas ends up getting a touchdown out of it one play later. Did KU steal BYU's mojo?
Yeah, I mean, I think they kind of did. I mean, like you mentioned, BYU has gotten a lot of good breaks this season. I mean, you talked about the Utah game and the defensive holding or pass interference, whatever it was called. But you can argue whether that was a penalty or not. But they got the call to go their way, and they were able to go down and kick the game-winning field goal. Yeah, I remember I was sitting at my desk here watching that game while I was working on some stuff late that night, and I see the play out of the corner of my eye, and I didn't even know like what had happened. It's just a scramble for the ball, and you're trying to figure out who touched it and who recovered it and everything. And yeah, it was kind of crazy. But I think that is kind of just how BYU games have gone this season, and it's gone in their favor every single time. Even the Oklahoma State game where they scored the touchdown at the end, where Oklahoma State just suddenly forgets how to tackle. And I mean, yeah, the luck was on in BYU's favor, and finally flipped into their opponent's hands, and finally cost them.
Alec, as observers of this situation, we don't cover Kansas. It still was almost painful to see how they were losing games. It was almost impossible to understand how this could happen over and over and over.
Yeah, I think that's why it was so frustrating for KU, and just kind of go like game by game. Illinois, like they just stopped running the ball, despite being able to have a lot of success back in week 2 against Illinois' defense on the ground. And I think that was maybe the first sign of trouble with Jeff Grimes. And I know that hire has turned into a pretty highly debated or hotly debated topic amongst KU fans throughout the season. Against UNLV, it's a late turnover, and then UNLV runs like 8.5 minutes off the clock despite getting the ball inside the 35-yard line, and a fumble being kicked forward for like 25 yards. Just like a crazy end of situation there. The West Virginia game, was it like a 10-point lead with less than 5 minutes to go, and they find a way to blow it. The TCU game, they just kind of got handled. Like TCU was just a better team that day. I thought the Arizona State game was kind of the mark of where KU's season kind of started to flip back in their favor, because that was the first time that Jalen Daniels didn't kind of directly contribute to a loss with a late game mistake. And they just lost 35-31 to a team that at the time, I think us in the Big 12 circles were like, hey, Arizona State's off to a good start, but how good are they really? And then ASU turns into what they turn into. And I think that loss is even more an indicator of, hey, this was like maybe KU's get right spot, where they kind of started to figure it out. They blast Houston. And then Fitz, like you said, they lost at K-State and in a game that they probably shouldn't have lost. Like if Jalen Daniels doesn't fumble on that play where he kind of like flips forward in a helmet or an elbow, or a fist kind of goes into the ball, I think the streak ends in Manhattan, and they lose 29-27. And even after that, they had an opportunity to win with the 2-minute drive that they weren't really able to execute at a high level. But I think the last 2 weeks are KU's best play of the season. And quite frankly, I think they're seeing the best Big 12 team this Saturday in Arrowhead.
Yep, I would agree with that. We'll get to KU and Colorado in one of our spotlight games towards the end of the show, because we got a couple of really good ones in this league. But the resulting chaos of KU kind of slowly picking off leaders, and Iowa State picking up a loss to Tech, and now Kansas State losing to Arizona State. All of a sudden, there's questions about the college football playoff, where the Big 12 stands. There's a scenario where they don't get a team in, and that would involve more confusion because they don't have a high enough ranked team, which would be really bad. But right now, it looks like the committee is going to put Boise State in one of the byes and make the Big 12 play. And in fact, BYU is kind of seated 12th in the bracket right now, which isn't very flattering. This could be really costly for the league, Cody.
Yeah, you need to pray that Notre Dame beats Army this week and takes that scenario kind of out of the picture. But yeah, I mean, it's you can argue about whether BYU's ranked too low, with their one loss and being behind all the 2-loss SEC teams. But even when you take when you just look at like metrics, and like if you look at like the old BCS model, that there's a Twitter account that puts it out each week, that BYU's in the same spot, I believe, if not one spot higher or one spot lower. They're right around the same spot. So, even if you want to say that the committee's being biased and not giving the Big 12 respect, the metrics themselves don't favor the Big 12 either. So, you really want to hope that Army loses this game against Notre Dame and doesn't have to, you don't have to worry about, this doomsday scenario that's still on the table.
Albeit Alec, I don't like being anti-Army, but come on, Notre Dame, right? I mean, this has been an insane year in college football. I think there's parity spilling out all over the place, but in the Big 12, that parity means you're bad. That's just kind of what the national media thinks, but they might be right. I'm not sure how good this league really is.
Yeah, first of all, I think Notre Dame will blast Army this weekend. I don't think Army will fumble 7 times like Navy did, but I do fully expect Notre Dame to easily handle Army. So I think that scenario of 2 G5 teams getting in, with one of them being an undefeated Army, seems pretty unlikely to me. That being said, I kind of feel like the Big 12 is actually in a pretty good position moving forward in terms of re-securing a bye. Through the first 3 weeks, I think what we've seen in the CFP rankings is Boise State is kind of frozen between like 11 to 13-ish. They've kind of fluctuated between that area. And if you look at the remaining teams contending for a Big 12 title, all of them have a pretty good opportunity to continue building their resume. If it's Colorado, they're going to have at least one more CFP win or CFP top 25 win on their resume. That would come in the Big 12 title game. If it's BYU, they're going to have 2 because they're going to have Arizona State here this weekend, and then they're eventually going to have the Big 12 title game as well. If it's Iowa State, it's probably going to be potentially could be K-State if some things work out for K-State to get back into the polls, then the Big 12 title game. And I think Arizona State is the one that is maybe best positioned of all of them to have more wins against ranked teams go on their resume. They obviously get BYU this weekend. That could be one. If K-State, like I said, gets back into the polls, that could be a second one for them. And then the Big 12 title game could be a third for Arizona State. And I just think that there's more upward mobility on these Big 12 resumes than there is for Boise State. Now, Boise State could have a rematch with UNLV, and that would be a potential ranked win for the Broncos, an additional one. But how much stock is put to that? Because Boise State already beat UNLV this season. I just think there's more upward mobility, I guess, for the Big 12 to re-secure one of those buys. And I wasn't overly shocked that they fell behind Boise State on Tuesday night. But there are, and I generally think that the committee does a good job with the rankings, but there were some discrepancies or just some inconsistencies, I guess, that I don't necessarily love, that they continue to kind of execute with various teams in various spots throughout the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Is Indiana overrated even though they're unbeaten?
I mean, I think you can make the argument that they are just because of the schedule they've played.
Yep.
But in my opinion, you have to respect a team that goes out and wins every game that they play. Even if they get blown out by, I should say this, if they get blown out by Ohio State and it's like a 3-touchdown game, I think they probably drop quite a bit. But if they keep it close, I think that then shows that, okay, this is a pretty respectable team. They're probably seated right where they should be then.
I would think getting Indiana with a loss or two would kind of help, maybe move a Big 12 team up there higher, but someone's got to start winning. And we're facing a situation this weekend where if Arizona State beats BYU and if Colorado loses to KU, we got a bunch of 2-loss teams in this league in terms of conference records. And I would think the worst scenario for the Big 12 would be a nightmare scenario would be a 3-loss team somehow makes it to Arlington, because I can tell you this, a 3-loss Big 12 team, whether it's Kansas State or, someone else, probably isn't going to get put in the playoff if there's enough teams out there to pick from. They're just not. It's kind of a mess. The Big 12's mess is going to haunt them, or we're going to see, maybe the committee will come around and say, okay, this is really competitive football. We're not doing this right. Alec, I just don't trust the committee to do the Big 12 right.
I don't not trust them to do the Big 12 right, or give the Big 12 the due justice that it maybe deserves. I just kind of think that you opened the show talking about like the league's parity, right? Mm-hmm. I think the league's parity is working against it quite a bit. And Brett Yormark talked about how exciting the parity would be for the league in his last major public setting at Media Days, and talked about how fun it would be. And I think that's true. It's fun, but like, it's not good for the conference when you don't have a no doubt really good team at the top of the league. And you could say the SEC doesn't have that either, but we know that so many teams at the top of that league are capable of winning multiple games in the CFP because of their roster construction, that I don't think it hurts the league as much in the SEC as it does the Big 12. And I think if you're Yormark, like, you really need your favorites to win this weekend. Like, you need, I guess it doesn't matter who wins the Arizona State BYU game as much, but you really need Iowa State to beat Utah. You really need Colorado to handle business and beat Kansas and look good doing it. And I think you also want K-State to beat Cincinnati, because K-State's not dead yet, but like, they will be dead if they lose to Cincinnati. So I think all things kind of considered, like, I think the committee does a good job. There are certain things that they've done here in the last couple of weeks that bother me. Like, I don't think Miami should rank where they do right now at number 8. I don't understand why Miami is at number 8. Boise State is at 12. SMU is at 13, and BYU is at 14. Like, to me, those teams have all played similarly the last few weeks, and they have similar resumes. I don't understand the difference in those teams being ranked where they are. And to go back to Indiana, this is one that so many topics of conversation in the last 72, 48 hours have been centered around Indiana and Texas. But Penn State is in that same group to me. Now, Penn State has played a better schedule when you look at it on the whole compared to Indiana, because they played West Virginia, not Florida Atlantic, and Penn State's Big Ten schedule is better than IU's, because I think Indiana's going to end up playing 7 of the 8 worst teams in the Big Ten this year. They just got a lucky draw. But at number 3, Texas, 4, Penn State, and 5, Indiana. Those 3 teams are all the same to me in terms of their resume. No super impressive wins. You don't have a bad loss on a resume for any of those teams. They rank right there because that's where they should rank. But like, why is Georgia all the way down at 10 when they beat Texas? Like, there's just some inconsistencies, I guess, that make it really difficult to kind of like understand everything. And that's why I think that the Big 12 has the ability to like move back up, because I kind of expect things to sort out and the better teams to win this weekend and win next weekend, because I kind of feel like we have an idea of who those teams are. Like I said, it doesn't matter who wins the ASU BYU game. I think the winner of that game is probably going to go to Arlington. I expect Iowa State to handle business at Utah, and I think Colorado is going to do just fine in Arrowhead. I think that KU is probably due for some regression after the last 2 weeks. And quite frankly, like, Colorado's played like crap last weekend with multiple turnovers and failing to capitalize on some Utah mistakes, and they still won handily. So I think Colorado's going to be okay too this weekend. And if all that stuff kind of happens, I think it'll come back in favor of the conference.
Cody, look, Big B loves chaos. We know that. He says it all the time. And chaos can be entertaining, but this is like I love roller coasters, but old wooden ones are both fun and they beat the hell out of you. This is an old wooden roller coaster of a conference. And I get back to this. I asked Alec this. I'm going to ask you, is this league really competitive or just not very good this season?
I honestly want to say it's just not very good.
I'm getting there.
And I think it's because, all these top teams that were in the preseason poll, like your Oklahoma State, Utah, that were projected to be good, that aren't. I think that kind of signals that it's not a very good conference right now. And I mean, yeah, you can bash me for saying that and not wanting to, pump up the Big 12, but I think it's just an honest answer that it's just not a very good conference. One thing I want to mention quick, I know Army gets all the attention for, possibly stealing a bid, but I think Tulane's one you got to watch out for too, with them being just ahead of Arizona State and Iowa State this week in the rankings. They're undefeated in the American. They'll have a chance to, I think they've already clinched a spot in their conference title game where they'll play Army. So, they can pick up a win there. And if it is a 3-loss, Big 12 champion, and you've got Tulane sitting there at whatever it would be with only 2 losses, and those 2 losses are to Kansas State and Oklahoma, I would think the committee would probably give them a decent look as far as, getting a bid too. So, I just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah, you're very right. a lot of things can happen to the Big 12 over the next 2 weeks. We'll keep a little pulse on that and make sure we keep you ahead of the curve. And let's move on to the next topic, because this is one I'm fired up about. I really am. I think the Big 12 is going to have problems with their TV partners. ESPN loving the SEC, which we get. The Big Ten and Fox having this little relationship. I don't get that one as much. But TNT now is going to buy the rights, sub-license the rights to X number of football and basketball games starting next season, and show games on TNT, maybe even up on Max, their streaming service. We hear rumors that True TV is going to become a all sports channel. Of course, they also handle the NCAA tournament quite a bit. Alec, I think this is a big development for the conference, even though they're primarily going to get games that would have been on Plus, and ESPN Plus, now to show on TNT. But that's a big upgrade, going from that streamer in particular to an over-the-air thing like TNT, a cable entity that we know.
Yeah, to me, I agree with you, Fitz. I think it's a really good deal for the Big 12. And to compare it to the basketball deal that came out a few weeks or months ago about the CBS Sports Network deal, I know that CBS Sports Network kind of owns the three of us. Not the most accessible thing on the planet. CBS Sports Network is not. And I think this is much more favorable for the conference. I think it's a good deal for TNT as well, with them losing their NBA rights. Quite frankly, like college football, at least in my opinion, I think the data bears this out across the sport, is a better thing to invest in than NBA regular season games. And we know that TNT doesn't get the NBA finals, and they have not gotten it for a long time, or maybe even ever. I know ESPN's had those for a long time, at least my whole life. I remember them having it. So I think this is a really good deal for both parties. And while you're going to see some of your lower tier games that were on ESPN Plus migrate over to TNT, True TV, TBS, whatever it ends up being. That is better than it being on ESPN Plus. Not that I think ESPN Plus is a bad product, because I don't. I think it's fine, but this is a better place for more of your games to be at, Cody, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't really see a negative with this, because in my opinion, any of the games that are on ESPN Plus aren't helping you in any way. I mean, maybe this is just me frustrated with the app myself, because half the time it doesn't work when I want to sign in and watch something. But I don't see a negative to this, as far as games being taken off that and putting on something that's a lot more accessible to households.
I like the consistency of ESPN Plus, that not a single user has ever seen the start of a college football game. It's something to be said about that. But I also don't mind it. I think we're headed towards streaming. I just think maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves and what the streaming value is at this moment. I think people still want to have a cable-like interface, whether it's YouTube TV or one of the other services. There's just a sense of familiarity there that they want to keep. And until someone can create an app that lets you just flip between services like you do TV channels, I don't think we'll see full move into streaming. But this is, I see Brett Yormark's hand in this. I mean, he's an NBA guy. So he's been very familiar with everyone that's running TNT and TBS, and he knows why they were invested in the NBA. He knows that they've lost the NBA. This is actually part of the settlement for them feeling like they weren't given an opportunity to match bids. This is, kind of a here, take this and go away type thing. But I think there's a bigger plan here, Alec, and maybe it's just me loving conspiracy theories. But I think Brett Yormark's walking this entire conference towards TNT and that entire Warner Brothers family, where they might land in the next contract. Why? Because they can build up Big 12 basketball like they did the NBA, maybe not with the same talent, but they can make a big product.
We can get Chuck and Shaq and Kenny doing pre, post, and halftime shows for Big 12 football.
Sure. Yeah.
Games.
You know what? So they do the postseason. They might want to do some in-season stuff. But
listen, man, I would love it to hear Chuck talk about some random Texas Tech Baylor football game in the middle of October. And if you don't, then you know what? Go watch another game, because that is the best TV on the planet, is Charles Barkley. I think it's possible. And I actually think it kind of makes some sense for the league if they end up kind of migrating away from ESPN and Fox, whenever that ends up being. I think it's in 6 years. Is that what it is? It would make sense. I think having an exclusive media partner has worked out fairly well for the SEC to this point with ESPN. I think they would like more money to go to the 9 conference games, and I don't blame them for asking for that. And the Big Ten partnership with Fox has been very fruitful throughout the last decade or so for each side. I don't think CBS and NBC are necessarily thrilled right now with what return on investment they've gotten in their first full season broadcasting Big Ten games and the type of games that they've been able to put over the air. And I think their ratings kind of show that, especially with CBS and how those compare to what they did a year ago with SEC games. But I do think that TNT could be a really functional, Turner could be a really functional quality partner for the Big 12. My one concern with it is when you think of college football and where to watch college football games, you go to ESPN and then you go to Fox. I don't think that Turner or TNT partner channels immediately come to mind for very many fans. And I think that would be one of my immediate concerns for the league is, are you able to change the way human minds work when they're not a fan of one of your schools? I need to go to TNT or True TV or TBS or HBO Max or whatever it ends up being. So that is my one concern. And I think you've kind of seen this to a certain extent with college basketball games on Fox and FS1 because everyone just goes to ESPN for college basketball games.
Yep, I agree with all that. It is a challenge, but also I feel like this is like training time over the next 5 years, trying to get people used to looking for games on TBS. I'm really intrigued by this, Cody. Actually, what the Big Ten's done with its contracts has benefited the Big 12 because they can't be competing in the time slots. And it might drive a CBS to try something different. You're right. Those games on those platforms haven't been as good. Why? Because most of the Big Ten inventory stinks. It just isn't entertaining football. And I feel like we're looking at Kansas and what they're doing right now. Big 12 games are so volatile. They're all kind of entertaining. I don't know that Kansas State, Arizona State was particularly entertaining, but for the most part, these games are competitive. What's that?
It was for Sun Devil fans.
Oh, absolutely. But still, I can't figure out why they didn't beat K-State 48-14 because there wasn't much effort there. But I think some of these networks next time around might take a second look at the Big 12 because of the depth of inventory, not necessarily that their second or third game matches up to the SEC, but the fourth and fifth game is probably better.
Right. And, Big 12 games are known to be exciting. It's not the, pass happy spread offense, 50s, point games or whatever, like it was, a few years ago, but it's still way more entertaining than, a Big Ten game that's, a defensive slugfest where, or it's a blowout because it's, Ohio State against Purdue or, Penn State against Northwestern or something like that, where it's just not going to be a good game. And, that's where I think, we talked about the parity being or hurting the Big 12 as far as the playoff. It's going to help itself when it comes to these TV contracts and, these networks seeing the entertainment value of, a close game where, any game, any week is going to be close and can, produce an upset or something like that. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think they'll definitely think about that the second time around.
Okay, boys, let's move on to our upset of the week. I'm looking at this schedule. I'm like, are we all going to pick Kansas over CU, even though we may not really think? I don't know what you would consider an upset in here. I don't think Arizona State being BYU is an upset. I'm going to go with Arizona winning at TCU just out of wanting to be different. I think Arizona might have, found a little confidence, and we'll see if that pans out. That's a talented team. They just haven't put it together at all. Thoughts?
Al, go ahead.
Yeah, that's not a team I would pick. At all.
I don't feel good about it. I just picked it.
At our website at Cyclone Alert, we do our weekly picks every week, and I think last week both myself and Pete Blazevich wrote that there's no circumstances where we would bet on Arizona at any instance right now, and then they proceeded to hammer Houston. So maybe it is a good pick. In terms of upset, I think there's two that I go
Okay.
to. The UCF at West Virginia game. West Virginia is +3. Morgantown's a difficult place to play. They can get to a bowl game. Garrett Green will be back for the second straight week. I think that can help them. And the other place I go to is actually the Iowa State at Utah game. Utah, a similar kind of situation to KU, where have lost a ton of close games. I think 5 of their 6 straight losses have been by 1 score or less. We know how good Utah's defense is. I think it'll be a close game. And I think that that's just one that you kind of have to circle from the perspective of you expect it to be a close game. It's on the road for Iowa State. And Cody did a lot of research earlier in the year about, favorites and losing outright on the road in the conference. So that's one that I would also circle.
Interesting.
Well, here's a surprise. We've got the same upset pick. I'm also going West Virginia over UCF. Mountaineers are 1 game away from bowl eligibility. I think it's probably pretty important for Neil Brown to get that, even though he got the contract extension last year. But he's got to find some consistency there. So I think there's some sense of urgency for them to get this one done at home. And for UCF, they've lost 8 of their last 10 away games, dating back to last season. So I don't really trust them being a favorite on the road. So yeah, I'll go with West Virginia on that one.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm really happy I'm filling in, because if my picks are crappy, I won't be here next week. So you can talk about me, but I won't care. I just came in, caused chaos. Big B wants that chaos, and then I left. Let's go with the lock of the week. I'm going to let Cody, you take this one. Who's your lock?
I'm going to keep picking against them until I find a way to win. So I'm going to go with Texas Tech over Oklahoma State. I just think the Pokes have checked out. Maybe Alan Bowman has a big game against his former team, but I just don't see a way in which Oklahoma State can get enough stops to keep this close or even pull ahead.
That is also where I would go, but I'll zag a little bit. I'll go with Arizona State covering 3.5 against BYU. Put your forks up, boys. Arizona State's going to go to the Big 12 title game. I think that this team is playing really, really well right now. I think when you look at their loss at Cincinnati, that was a situation where Sam Leavitt didn't play. I know Cam Scadaboo seems to be a little bit banged up for them, but that hasn't mattered too much in the last couple of weeks. I think Arizona State beats a wounded BYU team that's really struggled the last couple of weeks and 3 of the last 4 or 5 weeks. When you think about the situation they had against Oklahoma State, you think about the way they played against Utah and obviously losing last week to KU. So give me Arizona State to cover in Tempe, and that should be a pretty rowdy environment from everything I understand and have read about online.
Okay. Well, I would take that one, but I kind of feel like it's just picking on Oklahoma State right now. They're kind of like a 50-year-old boxer, a 60-year-old boxer. We remember what they were, and then it turns out they're not that great.
Are they wearing assless chaps?
That was the best part of the night right there. I mean, if Mike Tyson's in incredible shape, right? The dude's got an old man's ass. Let's be honest here. That was an old man ass. I'm going to go with Arizona State. I think BYU had their bubble burst a little bit. I think they're a very good team, but I think Arizona State is incredibly confident coming out of their win last week. And they taste it, man. They seem like the most hungry team right now in the Big 12, along with Kansas. So I think that's going to be very interesting, and that kind of segues us right into that Colorado-Kansas game as one of our spotlight games. I think Colorado's really good, guys. I think they're the most deserving team that could do the most damage in the playoff right now, because they do have that elite talent that honestly other teams in this conference don't have access to. They've got 2 Heisman hopefuls. I think they're going to get really challenged by Kansas, though. If there's one team that won't put up with, some of the physicality and stuff, it's Kansas. They're going to push back. But I still got to believe Colorado's going to win this. I just can't think Kansas is going to run the table on 3 straight games like this.
I'll jump
in
here.
Alec.
I'll jump in here. The line is 2.5, but I almost would take Colorado up to like 6.5. I really think that they're going to win this weekend. And part of that is I love the matchup in the secondary between Colorado's really dynamic receivers of obviously Travis Hunter, LeJontay Wester, Jimmy Horn, all those guys against obviously Kobe Bryant, Mello Dotson, OJ Burrows. I think that's a really fun matchup. Probably the best secondary in the conference against the group's best receivers in the conference.
True.
But one of the reasons why I like Colorado so much is Shador is so good in the pocket when he has time. And this KU team doesn't have a great pass rusher. They're missing that from a year ago when they had it. And now what you're seeing is Shador has time. They've started to run the ball a little bit better here in the last couple of weeks. And Jalen Daniels hasn't been as good under pressure this year. And Colorado's defensive line is probably the most disruptive in the conference. I just think this is a good matchup for Colorado. I expect the receivers to get open. I think they're going to generate enough pass rush against Jalen Daniels, and their run defense has been really good when you think about what BJ Green has given them and then what the Pitt transfer on the edge has given them, whose name is escaping me right now. But yeah, I think Colorado wins in Arrowhead by about a touchdown this weekend, Cody.
Interesting.
Yeah, I trust Colorado too in this one to win. I think one thing to point out is, the success that they've had on the road. They've won, I believe it's 4 straight road games since that Nebraska loss. And, I think that just shows the improvements that Dion and his staff have made, over the course of this season. I mean, that North Dakota State game, they didn't look great. They probably could have lost that one. And then I think those flaws kind of expose themselves against Nebraska. But since then, they've fixed a lot of stuff, and they're just their poise and handling those hostile environments on the road. I don't have much doubt that they're going to be able to go into Arrowhead and win this one.
Alec, in my book, Deion Sanders and his staff have done one of the better coaching jobs in the Big 12 this year. You got to look at Kenny Dillingham and Kalani Sitake naturally and other people, but what they've done is they've actually gotten their team a little bit better every week to the point now where they're a really good football team.
Yeah, and if they win this weekend at KU, no offense, Cody, they're going to smash Oklahoma State.
Oh, yeah.
But it would be so Mike Gundy, though, at the same time, for that to be his one Big 12 win. Like the revenge of 2011, I guess you could say, in a certain sense. But no, I think Colorado wins this week. I think they get to the Big 12 title after beating Oklahoma State next week. And at that point, Brett Yormark's world is going to be just green with dollar signs, I would imagine. So I think that the league would really like it if Colorado keeps winning. I think it's good for the conference if CU keeps winning. And quite frankly, I think it's really good for college football if they keep winning, because whether or not you love or you hate Dion, you're watching Dion and you're watching his boys play. So I think it's a really good opportunity for the conference this weekend and a big opportunity at 2:30 on Fox.
As I start to pivot to the second game, Cody, are Colorado and BYU just, I don't want to say best brands, but best attractions in this conference right now in terms of viewership? BYU has a ton of fans. Colorado is such an intriguing story. That seems like the matchup the Big 12 would want in that title game. There's great storylines there.
Yeah, I think between those two, the arguments you made about their big fan bases, but I think you could throw Arizona State in there too. I mean, they're a pretty big, school, got a big alumni base, and I think I mentioned it last week about just their future and being able to dip into some NIL funds that they probably got kind of waiting around. So yeah, I think you could put Arizona State in there too, but I'm not sure what the pairings could be like depending on who wins what. Obviously BYU and Arizona State probably can't face each other again, but yeah, if you get Colorado in there, I think you will be happy either way, whoever they face.
I agree. Okay, let's move on to that BYU Arizona State game. Cody, look, I saw Arizona State. I've seen BYU. It's 2 of Kansas State's losses. This is going to be a really entertaining game. And BYU is going to have to play better if they want to win on the road in this one.
Yeah, I love the quarterback battle in this one. I think it's 2 of the grittiest guys in the conference. I saw some Arizona State fans on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now, kind of sarcastically comparing Sam Leavitt to Jake Plummer. He's just kind of got that gritty winner's attitude, and puts his body on the line for runs and first downs and stuff. But yeah, I think Arizona State wins this one. I've said it before. I just don't trust BYU with how many close calls they've had, and obviously last week it finally caught up to them. And I just think the momentum that Arizona State has under Kenny Dillingham is going to get them this big win that they need.
Alec,
I agree.
Arizona State's enrollment, as we speak, just went up to 190,000. They have that many enrolled now. They're over 200. It's amazing how big that school's become. This atmosphere could be incredible. They just haven't had this kind of game at their stadium in a long time that has stakes like this with a really good Arizona State team.
Yeah, last one would be 2015 when they hosted Notre Dame, I think is what I saw. First time they're getting a ranked-on-ranked matchup in about a decade. So big opportunity for them. I know I've seen some tweets or seen something shared about the demand for student tickets this weekend in Tempe is pretty high. And I just feel like that this team is playing, like you said, Fitz. They seem to be really locked in. They seem to have a great understanding of what's in front of them and to how to accomplish those things. And I will say, like, if you're looking for a reason to doubt ASU at this point, it's probably how do you handle success? You're 9-2. Everyone is now for the first time this season telling you how good you are. You get a number next to your name for the first time, and you also have the opportunity to play for a Big 12 title potentially if you win your last 2 games. So all things considered, I think that a lot of things are in front of Arizona State this weekend, and I think they're a better team than BYU, to be honest with you. And I think that Sam Leavitt is the best quarterback in the conference that no one talks about. I think Cam Scadaboo is the best running back in the conference, to be quite honest with you. And you combine his physical running style with Leavitt's ability to find Tyson downfield, and it's a pretty talented and explosive offense with a great offensive mind on the sidelines.
I want to pick up on that because I agree with you on Cam Scadaboo. Maybe not in production, but in his impact to the game. Kansas State did a pretty good job last week, bottling him up less than 3 yards a carry, 25 carries, but you always have to account for him. You can't just say, okay, we stopped him, let's back the safeties out. You always have to be aware of him because he can hit a home run at any moment, and it changes the game. But Cody, to kind of bring this all around full circle, these are 2 incredible games, and they're both 2:30 kicks, one on Fox, one on ESPN. That's one of the disadvantages of this contract from the 2 networks pawing at each other, trying to get games because they're not afraid to line up the 2 best games. Either one of these games might get huge ratings. Now they're going to be kind of watered down because Big 12 fans, the general fans, need to choose which one they want to watch.
Well, it's kind of crazy you mentioned that because as you guys were talking, I was looking up the schedule because I noticed that it was 2:30 kicks. For some reason, I thought the Arizona State one was like a late night one that probably nobody was going to watch or anybody on the East Coast was going to watch. So I think that's probably a positive that it's not a super late game. But yeah, that is kind of a bummer that they're both going to be at 2:30 at the same time. But just kind of looking at the national schedule, there really isn't much else that's intriguing at that time. I know CBS has their 2:30 time, but that's Penn State at Minnesota. So unless that one gets interesting, you're probably going to get most of the eyes on the Big 12 at that time.
It's going to be competitive in that time slot because you have Arizona TCU kicking off at 2 p.m. on Plus. Guys, why didn't you move that up? You can get your own time slot. You can pick your time. BYU, Arizona State, Colorado KU, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State again on Plus. UCF and West Virginia on ESPNU, all in that same time slot. So it's going to be a lot of divided viewing. Boys, have I forgotten anything? Did I skip over anything a Big B does?
You've got to take your shirt off.
That I know he doesn't do that. I know because I've seen the views, and the views would go way up if he did that. They'd go through the roof. You know it, and I know it. But hopefully he'll be back soon with the threat of taking off his shirt, so everyone is kind of like a hostage situation.
That's it. We made that premium.
What's that?
I thought we made that premium or something.
We need that. Oh my gosh. An only Big B site. We got it. We're going to make some money off of that. Just feet and belly shots. That's all he's going to do. That's it for the Big 12 Insiders Game Day show. I'm Fitz, and for Alec and Cody, we're out. Probably just in the nick of time.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.